So imagine you take a garlic clove and you plant it in a nice, warm, comfortable spring bed without giving it a chilling period first. You know what happens? It will absolutely fail to produce a bulb. You'll effectively end up with nothing more than a leafy green onion. Crazy, right? Okay, let's dive into this highly complex and honestly kind of controversial truth about one of the world's most resilient plants. Because beneath the papery exterior of Allium sativum is a finely tuned, biochemically complex organism that operates on a very strict set of evolutionary rules.
Just take quick heads up before we really get into the weeds today. This explainer is a strictly advanced, highly technical biological breakdown. Now, we did post a much simpler version of this topic a few days back, so if you're just looking for a basic gardening overview, you might want to start there. But if you're ready to understand the intricate physiological triggers of this plant, you are absolutely in the right place.
And, standard disclaimer here, while we are definitely going to discuss some fascinating physiological and biochemical impacts of this plant, this is purely for educational science. It does not replace professional medical advice.
All right, here's our scientific syllabus for today. We'll start with the core science, move through its developmental life cycle, break down the actual mechanics of cultivation, look at real-world biological applications, examine its environmental vulnerabilities, and finally, decode the biochemistry of harvesting and curing. Starting off with Section 1, the science of Allium sativum. Let's start right at the foundation and break down the core physiological behaviors of this plant into 5 spectacular science points. First up is vernalization. This is the strict temperature-dependent trigger that is required for the bulb to actually divide. Second is photoperiodism. As the plant grows, it literally monitors the length of the day to execute a massive metabolic shift from growing green shoots above ground to bulking up its clones down below. Third is its biochemical defense. The plant synthesizes intense sulfur compounds, primarily allicin, to act as a potent natural deterrent against pests like ticks and mosquitoes. Fourth, we have asexual reproduction. When you plant a single clove, you are initiating complete genetic cloning right from its base. And fifth is enzymatic curing, which is a precise biochemical drying process that dramatically extends its cellular shelf life. These 5 mechanisms are the absolute foundation of how this organism survives.
Let's zoom in on that first point for a second, because it's arguably the most critical. Vernalization is the exposure to cooler temperatures for a defined period, usually 4 to 6 weeks of chilling. The crucial takeaway here is that without this forced period of cold dormancy, the biochemical trigger for multiplication simply never activates. The plant will shoot up some green leaves, sure, but beneath the soil, it's just going to stubbornly remain a single undivided mass.
Moving right along to Section 2, evolutionary origins and development.
To really master this organism, we have to understand its developmental timeline. The plant has to survive these strict chronological phases to reproduce successfully. Notice how it all starts in the fall. Month 0 is all about planting for critical root establishment before the ground totally freezes. Then, in winter, we hit that vital cold dormancy, where vernalization finally occurs. As spring rolls around, the plant detects the lengthening days, that photoperiodic trigger we talked about, and it shifts all its energy into rapid shoot growth. Finally, in midsummer, moisture is naturally restricted, and the bulb goes through its final maturation. It's a highly calibrated biological clock.
But, not all of these plants follow the exact same architectural blueprint. Depending on their evolutionary genetics, their anatomy dramatically dictates both the clove yield and their post-harvest longevity. We basically have 2 types, hardneck and softneck varieties. Hardnecks put immense energy into a stiff central flower stalk called a scape. This results in 12 or fewer highly uniform cloves and a much shorter biochemical storage life of about 3 months. Softnecks, on the other hand, lack that rigid center stalk. That gives them a supple top, allowing them to stack up to 40 irregular cloves in multiple layers, and they possess a much more stable, prolonged curing life of 6 months or more.
Section 3, the mechanics of cultivation.
All right, this is where biological theory meets physical action. We need to look at the exact mechanics required to artificially replicate these evolutionary conditions. Pay close attention to this specific anatomical feature, the basal rooting plate. It's that flat, hardened tissue at the bottom of every individual clove. This is ground zero for the plant. If this base is damaged, or, crucially, if you plant it upside down, the clone is in serious trouble. Unlike a lot of other seeds, Allium sativum really struggles to reorient itself. It will literally exhaust its internal energy reserves trying to make a U-turn underground, and it'll die before ever breaking the surface.
Because of that, we have to enforce some very strict cultivation parameters. First, you must maintain the inner paper sheaths on the cloves for protection. Second, you absolutely must orient the basal plate down and the pointed tip up. Third, depth is mathematically tied to your climate. Plant 1 to 2 inches deep in warm areas, but go 3 to 4 inches down if you're facing freezing northern winters. You also have to maintain a strict 4 to 6 inch biological spacing. If you cram them any closer, their root systems will fiercely compete for nutrients and you'll stunt the whole crop. And lastly, if you're using containers, compress the soil by 20% to physically stabilize that root zone. These parameters are completely non-negotiable if you want to maximize photosynthetic efficiency.
And then there's the chemistry of the dirt itself. You need a near-neutral soil pH, right between 6.0 and 7.0. Now, what's so critical about this specific range is that it unlocks maximum biochemical nutrient uptake for the plant. If the soil gets too acidic or too alkaline, essential nutrients become locked in chemical compounds that the basal roots just cannot absorb. Basically, you'll end up starving the organism no matter how much fertilizer you throw at it.
Let's jump into Section 4, Biological Applications and Examples.
So how do we practically apply this biological data in totally different environments? It's basically a massive environmental hack. When you move from a natural outdoor biome to an artificial indoor container, you have to engineer the variables. Take vernalization, for example. Outdoors, winter naturally handles the chilling. Indoors, you have to forcefully induce it by putting them in a refrigerator for 4 to 6 weeks. Outdoors, you absolutely need a thick 2-inch organic mulch blanket to insulate against radical temperature swings, but indoors, where the climate is controlled, insulation is irrelevant, and your planting depth can decrease to just 1 inch since there is zero risk of frost.
But why go through all this intense engineering? It all comes down to the plant's nutritional payload. Beyond just basic survival, this organism is synthesizing a highly complex matrix of nutrients. As the bulb matures, it packs dense concentrations of vitamins A, C, and B6, right alongside essential trace minerals like manganese and selenium. These compounds profoundly benefit human physiology.
Which brings us to Section 5, Pathological and Environmental Pitfalls.
Because let me tell you, achieving a successful harvest is far from guaranteed. We really need to understand the systemic failures that can destroy the organism before it ever matures. Despite its robust chemical defenses, the plant is highly susceptible to specific threats. Fungal pathogens are a massive enemy, showing up visibly as tan, white, or purple necrotic spots on the leaves. Then you've got root rot, which rapidly sets in when soil gets waterlogged, creating an oxygen-starved anaerobic environment around the roots. If you're growing indoors, the lack of natural predators creates a severe vulnerability to microscopic spider mites. And like we said before, stunted development is a total certainty if you violate those spacing rules.
To defend the plant, we have to fight back and engineer the environment aggressively. First, amend your soil with 5 to 10% sand. This guarantees rapid hydrodynamic drainage to combat that deadly anaerobic root rot. Second, outdoor growers must apply that thick organic mulch layer to stabilize the stressful temperature fluctuations. And third, and this is absolutely critical, you must intentionally cease watering completely during the final weeks of the summer maturation cycle. By following these 3 steps, you almost entirely eliminate the risk of pathogenic rot and literally force the plant to harden off its bulbs.
Finally, Section 6, Harvesting and Biochemical Curing.
The end game here is turning this living plant into a stable, preserved biological product, and the extraction sequence is highly specific. First, you wait for senescence. That's when the lower foliage naturally dies back and turns yellow and brown. Then, you carefully mechanically loosen the soil around the basal plate. Never just yank it by the stem, or you'll traumatize the root plate. Extract the entire organism with its roots and stems intact. Next, you suspend it in a warm, dry, shaded place with lots of active ventilation. You leave it there to cure for 2 to 4 weeks until the outer sheaths become totally desiccated and papery. Only then do you sever the roots and stems. This delicate enzymatic drying process allows the plant to naturally seal off its living tissues and drastically extend its dormant shelf life.
Now, you might be looking at a freshly dug bulb covered in dirt, and your first instinct is to run it under the sink. Don't do it. Why must you only brush off dry dirt rather than washing them? Because introducing water at this stage violently interrupts that enzymatic curing process. Rehydrating those outer paper layers immediately invites the exact fungal rot we just spent months trying to avoid.
Once they are totally cured, it's all about optimal storage parameters. The cured organism demands a cool, dark, and extremely dry environment. Manipulating humidity and temperature like this allows us to essentially freeze the plant's metabolic clock for months on end, completely delaying its biological imperative to sprout all over again.
As we wrap up this complex breakdown, I want to leave you with a thought. Considering Allium sativum evolved to clone itself from a single clove just to survive harsh, unpredictable winters, could indoor artificial vernalization, where we perfectly control its dormancy in a refrigerator and completely shield it from pathogens, actually be the superior, highly controlled evolutionary path for its future cultivation? It really makes you wonder, right? Are we simply mimicking nature? Or have we actually engineered a more perfect artificial evolution for this incredible plant? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.